direct from the web, it's Billy Masters Live. And now, please welcome your host, Billy Masters.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Billy Masters Live. I am, of course, your host, Billy Masters, episode 43. Oh, my God. 43. Let's see, hold on, 22 weeks. So it's almost half a year. Oh, my Lord. It's just all creeping up on us. Today is, oh, my God, they put it up without me even asking. Thank you, Monica. Today is Tuesday, August, I can't see, 25th. So let me just tell you what happens here, because there's like technical things. There's like behind the scenes at Billy Masters Live. So the camera typically would be above the screen. And so I would be spending all of my time looking in the camera and not looking at you. So the camera is now right in front of the screen. So I'm looking in the camera, but I'm also looking at myself. Ooh, spooky. That's how real television works, kids. Anyway, welcome to the show. We have a great show today. Before I get to it, let me just tell you that on Thursday, this Thursday, we have Funny Gay Males, and we've talked about them so many times. They haven't been doing a lot. I don't think they've done anything together for a few years. So we're lucky to have them here. And we will be discussing comedy in, oh God, this crazy climate we're in. Typically, I like to start. Oh, and next week we've got two really special shows. One that relies on age. Let's just say there are age factors involved. So you know how I always say, if we're here, we're live. Please, God, let us be live. But we may have something rolled in. That's, again, another one of those technical terms. So you know how I always start with sort of an anecdote from the past. And last week we had our huge hairspray show. If you missed it, everything is on YouTube. It's on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Billy Masters TV. But we had Garrett Clayton on from the television version of the musical Hairspray. And I talked about going to see him in a play where he starred alongside Al Pacino and Judith Light. So when I was looking for pictures for that, and I thought to myself, I think I have photos from backstage. Well, there is only one photo from backstage, and it was taken by Judith Light, and it is of me and Al Pacino. And here's what's strange. Now, if you look at Al Pacino's left arm, his arm was by his side. When I went to take the picture and I asked him, and he was very polite, he didn't want to take the picture, but he took the picture, which of course is really ultimately all that matters. But all of a sudden he put his hand up by his neck. And I don't know why. I was wondering, was he pulling? See, so, you know, if I like put the hand like this, or maybe not that. Maybe if I did both, look how gorgeous. So I don't know exactly why he did that. Or maybe it was just an affectation. I don't know. But anyway, I got the picture with Al Pacino. And I didn't take one with Garrett Clayton. But more important than the picture with Al Pacino, I see this photo, and it is labeled Emmys 2008, Billy Masters and Rick. I have no recollection who Rick is. And we look like we're very close. We may have been on a date, but it's at the Emmy Awards, so it certainly wouldn't have been a date. So if anyone knows who Rick is, could you please contact me and let me know? I have no idea who this is. We were talking backstage. There are parts of my life that are a complete blur. And as my first guest would tell me, it's all for the best. Because she is usually, I refer to her as a co-host. She's not a guest. We co-host, well, first off, we've known each other for a good 20 years, and they weren't all good. Let's just make that very clear. And she's now shaking her head vigorously that try 25 or 30. I know, because she was drunk back then. I wasn't drinking as much then as I am now. But we worked together at 1 in 10 on WFNX for Boston Phoenix Radio. I was the perpetual fill-in. I was the permanent fill-in guest co-host. I think I had a title. And I also appeared with her on her show on NECN's New England Cable's News, The Take. There were lovely mugs with me. See, look, there I am. And there she is. And the lovely and talented Sue O'Connell is here.
Look at, there you are. That's me.
Hello, Sue.
Hello, sipping some tea, I see.
It's like a tribute to Regis and Kelly. That's what it is.
R.I.P. Regis. You know, my earliest memory of Regis was in the 1970s, where I think the Boston television station aired the LA morning show that Regis hosted in the 70s. And he and his co-host were playing a game called Pass the Zucchini. And they had a
Oh my God, I remember that.
I was so sick from school watching this going, who is this person? That's like my first memory of Regis Phillips.
Okay, so just because I'm a million years old and I may be wrong, I believe he was passing the zucchini with J.P. Morgan. Now, I may be wrong.
I don't think it was J.P. Morgan because I would have known J.P. Morgan from The Gong Show.
Oh, all right.
So it wasn't it was a much more frilly, girly, more typical TV celeb of that time. I don't know who his co-host was then. I'm gonna have to look it up. I've been asking like radio TV peeps here in Boston if they can remember, but no one can remember the 70s. And I only remember it because I was homesick, drinking chocolate milk on a yellow shag rug. So
well, as somebody just reminded me, and I say this with glee to all the people who came before me, and I consider you one of those, although not very far before me, although now that I think of it, you've gotten me into at least 4 jobs. So without Sue O'Connell, there would be no Billy Masters.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Well, I found a clip. We've got a clip to start with. And I think this sort of sets up today's show. This is over a year ago, well over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And this is a clip from The Take. And I just would like to see people to see, and then we'll talk about it. Here you go.
All right, so who are you picking for the presidential race? You looking at Pete Buttigieg as the future?
Well, first off, we're all talking about Joe Biden. He hasn't even declared yet.
Yeah.
So, but he's still the front runner. And I think that Biden, Camilla, I think that could be a really...
Kamala Harris.
Kamala.
Yeah,
whatever. Potato, potato. I think those two.
Okay.
You were not a mispronouncer. Congratulations. Not only did you get it right, you mispronounced her name like everybody else was. Good job.
But who predicted it? I am a soothsayer.
That was a great call. Good job.
And I will say,
and I asked you about politics. I mean, kudos to me for actually asking you a serious question.
Well, so let's continue that.
Did I run out of time?
Yes, it was actually okay. It was, we had done our 3 stories and it was tacked on at the end. And you I was like a Camilla in the headlights in that clip. So, but you know, I will say at the time, what impressed me about her and what continues to impress me is, and I say this with all due respect, she is like a pit bull.
Oh, yeah. But she's also, I find Kamala Harris to be the Goldilocks candidate because she is just enough of everything for all of the Democrats to find something to like and support about her. You know,
right.
She is exceptionally accomplished and talented. She's won elections. She has been on the law and order side. She's on the progressive side. Right. She represents a number of constituencies and communities. And she just is very appealing to almost every part of the Democrats, and I think some in the general election too. And people can see her being president, which in this case, you know, certainly people are living a lot longer. But if you've got a candidate who's over 70, the vice president isn't going to make a difference in terms of making or breaking it. Although you could argue that Sarah Palin broke John McCain's effort to become president.
Sure.
But you can see Senator Harris being the president and being in those meetings because of the way that she handled the hearings that people watched her in. So, but kudos to you, Billy. Good job.
I really usually don't know what I'm talking about, but I did know that. It's funny. She has not been my first choice all along. she's my first choice in even back then in terms of winning, but I would have much
But you
rather
categorize
seen-
them by gender. Is that what you do? You've got your
No.
gun up here.
No, I actually thought that vice president was wasted on her. I think I'd rather see her as attorney general, frankly. And I've said that all along because, as we know, vice president isn't a very powerful position.
Well, ask Dick Cheney. I mean, except for
yeah.
Dick Cheney.
And in terms of
did a lot.
in terms of breaking ties.
Yeah.
So, and that could be very powerful. And as you said, it's a good stepping stone. And given the other people that were being discussed, far better than practically everyone.
I actually think we had a very, the Democrats had a long list of very qualified candidates. Hold on.
Oh, God. I know we get very thirsty on this show.
Who could, a lot, it was a deep bench. And I think that also goes to show that, you know, we're going through this long needed, much needed reckoning of race and gender in the United States, I hope. And I've had just about enough of mediocre white guys. Like, just because you are a C student, that means you get to be vice president, where all of these women and these women of color who are enormously established and credentialed and smart and intelligent and successful finally are being like, oh, wow, look how many of them there are. Well, there always have been. We just haven't been looking to make sure that we lift them up. So I think it says a lot as to where we are, that we can now start considering things more broadly when we're looking to hire people.
And I also think, given the discussions about Joe Biden being overly friendly and touchy with people, having a woman who had been a critic of his on his side is a huge help.
Listen, I've heard a few African-American and Black friends talk about
Is there a difference between African-American and Black?
Indeed, there is. You want me to tell you? I can tell you.
I would love you. Please tell us.
Well, some people identify as Black because they want to make sure that they are unique in the of color world, like being Black or being Hispanic or Latino or Indian American or Native American is different from your experiences is different.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Black. If you're also Black, you identify because you could also be from the Caribbean islands, or you can be from other places that aren't necessarily part of the America.
And not necessarily part of Africa either.
Right. And so you can identify, but Black is a term that also has been in the mix, but is often now being, by I think, a younger generation, becoming the term more preferred.
Yeah.
What was I talking about before that?
So you were talking that you have friends who are Black and African American.
And what was the topic we were
we were talking about Joe Biden being handsy.
Oh, right. So Joe Biden, you know, a lot of folks say he's the Scottie Pippen. You know, he's the guy that played with the big player, Obama, and you have an established white man who was completely embraced his role as being number two to an African-American man.
Sure.
And then when he gets his opportunity to run for office, the first thing he does is make sure that he puts someone, a woman of color, a Black woman, in the position of power. So he's completely comfortable with sharing the power and privilege that he has, as a perspective of looking at the choices that Joe Biden has made in his later life in terms of who he lifts up and who he works with. And, you know, it's something some of my older African-American friends have pointed out, that, you know, taking a number two position to a young African-American man, you know, Barack Obama, who was just barely a senator and was just barely a state senator out of Chicago. It says a lot about Joe Biden.
Well, it also shows, when you look at the past, you realize he's going to be somebody who's looking for a partnership. You know, it's not going to be a disregarded vice president like so many who are just symbolic. I think he's looking for somebody he can work with and who he can hand things off to. And
someone's going to keep him awake in the meetings. I mean, Dick Cheney slept through a lot of meetings. You know, there'll be a lot of sleeping, and, you know, Vice President Harris, if they're elected, will be right there to give him a sharp elbow, make sure that she's keeping him up.
Well, let's talk about the election where there's all this issue about the Postal Service. Now, I said in the column, and it's just anecdotal, but it's my experience, is that I get mail forwarded to me. I'm in a Boston suburb, and mail from Los Angeles is coming to me every week or two whenever it piles up. And so last week I thought, oh my God, I'm never going to get my mail, which was important because there was a check coming from Bay Windows. And so I had it faster than I've had it in months. It was less than 48 hours, my priority mail. So I'm just wondering, in terms of the election and people doing mail-in ballots, how much of a problem do you think there's going to be?
Well, I think that if you have a ballot, we vote here in Massachusetts on Tuesday in our primary. If you have a ballot that you sent away for, you need to bring it. You don't put it in the mailbox, right? So at this point, if you're going to vote by mail or absentee voting in Massachusetts, then you should go to the polling station to drop it off. There are boxes at polling. There's early voting right now happening. You should go there. You could bring it election day and drop it off. You should not put it in the mail. And while all of these things that have been happening in the Postal Service are indeed directionally accurate, I mean, I'm skeptical enough to know that the Post Service pulls off boxes on a regular basis to replace them, and seeing truckloads of them doesn't necessarily mean that the apocalypse is coming, that they may just be pulling them in and out. I know that they can pull sorters out when they don't need them and put them back in. They're not doing that. If we looked at the hearings, we can see that there's some shady McShades going on there. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind that the reduction of mail that's happening right now because of the pandemic means that we're going to be able to have our mail work efficiently, although not at top shelf, because I think top speed, because I think some people are slowing it, not the mail carriers and the Postal Service, but I think the administration is working to discredit the mail, so that if they lose, they can say that the election was fixed. So I think we just got to keep a balance when we're talking about the Postal Service. There are problems that the administration is putting on it, but at the same time, they're going to be able to do their jobs, and we got to make sure that we filter what the president and his administration and his supporters say, to know that they're trying to build a narrative so that if they don't win in November, they'll say, "See, we told you, your mail-in ballots didn't get in."
Right, they have an excuse built in. I've also heard from a lot of people that if you are mailing in your ballots for the general election, you really want to get it in before October 1st.
Oh yeah, you want to get it. I mean, because listen, most of the people who are requesting mail-in ballots or absentee ballots, you know who you're going to vote for. They're
right,
and there are different races. It's not just president. Folks have different races in their
absolutely.
areas. But you want to get it in as quickly as you can and not waste any time on it. Make sure you sign it. And check. In some states, there's a difference between whether or not you need postage or not. And for the kids watching at home, postage is a stamp. It's got, you buy it, you can get it at CVS.
You can get it at CVS Forever stamp.
And you put it on the envelope. And when you put it in the mail, that's how you pay for the envelope to get shipped. It's called a stamp. Right. So, and then you have to sign it with a pen. That's something, not your finger and not a stylus, but a pen. You can sign the pen and put it in the envelope. That's a pen. So if you're going to vote by mail, you have to make sure you do
I even have a stamp. What kind of stamp is that? Oh my God. This is like the 4-cent stamp. This is all right. Make sure you have correct postage, because this is like, now what is this stamp?
Is that a forever stamp?
No, it is not. It's a 5-cent stamp. This has been sitting here since I was in grammar school. So get rid of that. That's not going to do anyone any good. And by the way, you know I'm old because I had to put on the glasses to tell you what kind of stamp it was.
This is like when we talk about K-Ballot on 1 in 10. We just
never get tired of talking about K-Ballot. So you and I were talking before we went on the air about how people are not going places that they typically go, and now we're coming into the fall, and I have noticed that I wrote about it in last week's column, which you can read at billymasters.com. It's always alive, and it's on Bay Windows. You can get it in print. Print is a newspaper. I don't have one. I have a 5-cent stamp. I don't have a paper. But I had written last week, there was this report that this water park in Wuhan opened, had huge numbers of people there. And I ran a photo of I was shocked.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering now that have people forgotten that there is a pandemic and that we are coming into flu season?
You know, Billy, I just want to do my flu pitch, you know, before we go into the virus, the new, the novel virus, you know, that a huge number of people worldwide, but face it, you probably only care about Americans. A huge number of Americans die every year from the flu that don't need to die.
That
totally avoidable, right? And there's a whole population of people who can't get flu vaccines, babies, people having certain treatments, folks who have immune problems. And a good 20 to 30% of people who have the flu don't have symptoms and are still contagious. So if you're saying I've never had the flu and I've never got a flu shot, you're lying to yourself, because you've had the flu and you've probably infected someone. So make sure you get your flu shot. I think you can start getting them now, right?
Yeah, I've noticed signs at CVS and other places.
You don't want to be spreading the flu and the coronavirus to people, because you'll just be killing them and we'll have even more deaths. So please get your flu shot. It's the safest thing we have right now out for vaccinations.
But the flu shot will not protect you from the coronavirus. And people have to understand they are two separate things.
Right. And I mean, I'm you know, we live in Boston, we're in Roxbury, and it's move-in time. It's a lot smaller for colleges and universities. We're right near Northeastern, we're right near Emerson, Boston University, Simmons. We're just completely surrounded. And the young adults are moving in, not as many as usual. But, you know, I just keep trying to put myself back to when you and I were young and the HIV/AIDS epidemic was beginning, and how our behavior from the ages of, you know, I don't know, from 14 to 32, can't say that I was the most upstanding citizen who adhered to doing all the things that I was supposed to do on all sorts of topics to keep myself.
She was drunk. Not that there's anything wrong with being drunk, by the way.
Yes, I was when I was 14 on a daily basis. But I think, I try to have some sympathy for young adults around what's going on, because it's hard for them to comprehend just because of the way their brains are. But for older people like us and people over 30, I'm hoping that we adhere to the regulations, so at least we're doing our part to stop the spread.
Yeah, I also think, you know, I can have sympathy because, for instance, I have a niece that's starting this fall at DC, and she is moving into her dorm this week. And there's already the discussion, how long is she actually going to be there? Because she may have to go home shortly. And how I've heard so many people saying it's not fair, and these kids miss their graduation, and they're missing spending time with their friends and blah, blah, blah. And I can sympathize, although you can't tell it's sympathy from the tone of my voice, but that is as close to sympathy as you get. And the reason I say that is because when I came out, the AIDS epidemic had just begun. I have no recollection of life without AIDS, life without condoms. And I heard from so many people, oh, you missed out, you didn't. That's life, kids. You know, I can have some sympathy for you, but this is what you've got. And if if you pretend that it's not happening, you're going to end up dead.
You know, there's that great Irish adage, you know, don't worry, nothing will be okay. Well,
thank you, Sue, for those hopeful words. You know, I don't know why you don't do more commencement speeches.
I did one. I did for, it was one of those pay for colleges before we knew that, you know, the colleges that you paid for your degree, not the nonprofit.
Was it? It wasn't Phoenix, that Phoenix thing, was it?
No, that they're actually the Harvard of online learning now. So
I know
Harvard, you know. But I did tell everybody that they're not as smart as they think they are, and when they get to be the boss and someone young comes to an idea with them and they shoot it down, they become the man. Like it's very deep.
Well, one of these days I'll become the man. Anyway, we're going to go to our guest, and I'm keeping you here for a little while. We'll see.
another Oscar video.
I know, look, she's got places to go. She's got a paying job. I don't. So, but our first guest, I actually interviewed him on our aforementioned 1 in 10 on WFNX radio. And we've now determined that we have met in West Hollywood. But he's just such a talented writer and an advocate for our community and really an icon. He has become an icon for our community. And I am thrilled to welcome Christopher Rice is here.
I'm an icon? I hope you're going to have me on every week with that kind of praise.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, the fact that you have a book that just came out like 3 days ago. When did the book came out last week?
The book came out last Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
What
when
day
books
is it?
come out.
It's all just been the day of the pandemic for me.
Yeah.
I haven't left my house in 6 months, so I have no idea what day it is. But yeah, I think it came out last Tuesday, and it's the third in a series that's been coming out once a year.
So were you planning to go on a tour? Was there a book tour ready? No.
These books are published by an imprint of Amazon. And so they have a very different publishing model than, just about anybody else in the industry. It's not very retail based. It's not very physical store based. It's their titles are driven by the marketing power of their own website. So there was never a plan. Maybe was going to do 1 or 2 events. There's a store here in Los Angeles called The Ripped Bodice, which is a romance focused bookstore that is wonderful with events. Those were all canceled, of course, but I didn't suffer anything close to what many writer friends of mine did this year. Their publications were just junked. I mean, it was like, it's been terrible.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember when you signed with Amazon, and there was a lot of space because you got in really very early in their imprinting history. And there were a lot of people that were thinking, as an established writer who had already published so many books, what kind of a move that was. And I had read an interview last night where you talked about that you really thought that was going to be the future and that was the way people were going to go. And look at that. You were ahead of the curve.
Well, maybe so. I think that it's interesting because it's been a while since I've signed with them. And I think that they remain incredibly exciting because of what they're willing to try and what they're willing to do and who they're capable of reaching. But it's almost like there are 2 economies of publishing. And I think there are still writer friends of mine who it's very valuable to them to have a connection to a physical bookstore and to have a connection to a bookseller who is a personality who talks up their work. And that is a publicity-based model that they pursue. Like the thing for people outside any business that relies on publicity and marketing, the difference is publicity is free, sort of. Marketing is what you buy. It's like ad placements. And traditional publishing is still about a group of people getting excited about a title and saying, we're going to try to get other people who are excited about books to talk about this. And there are still magical things that happen about it. There's still really big bestsellers like The Nightingale and Gone Girl that come out of traditional. But what I found is that some of us who have a more entrepreneurial spirit are excited by not just the idea of being an indie author, which is its own endeavor, which a lot of people have done to great success, but that idea that the lower price point is attractive to people, which is what we get at Amazon. Sure. The ability to sort of share the link all over and have this direct line between the consumer and the buy button, all of those things are very exciting. So I think, I made the decision because I looked at some great experiences friends of mine were having, being reinvented. Some writers who had been declared DOA were suddenly having a second shot at success in the
new authors.
Yeah, new authors. I mean, it's an exciting time, but I think it's interesting because I think by now, when I first made the choice, I really would have thought the scales would have shifted way further to one side. But I think
How so?
Well, I would have thought Amazon would have taken over probably the entire publishing market. And instead, they have become part of the ecosystem. They have become another way of doing things that's a piece of the whole puzzle. And traditional publishers are surviving. I think this year has been terrible for anybody who relies on any kind of physical retail space, obviously. Sure. But there are still books coming from all over the place, and I think what I like about the indie author space, which I'm not really technically in, is that it has provided a platform for minority authors. It has provided a platform. It has provided a proving ground for stories that didn't necessarily get a shot in the old system. You know, it's like, oh, this does work. This romance with two Black protagonists is going to work. There is an audience for this. All of that's incredibly exciting.
And let's just show people the cover of the new book, which is Blood Victory.
Mm-hmm.
And they can get it at Amazon. And again, the good thing about the pandemic, if there is a good thing, is that people are still able to get things through Amazon. That's where they've actually gotten most products while other places have shut down. Amazon has been a lifeline for so many people.
Yeah, I know it has been for me.
I'm just curious, when you first started, there was, I remember there was this whole thing of following in your mother's footsteps, and you really defined yourself as your own person, and you weren't in more the horror genre, but in thriller, suspense, really not slash, not gore. It was really...
And we should tell people who his mother is, just in case.
Oh, his mother's Anne Rice, for the 3 people who don't know.
You know, when I was at college, there was allegedly a group of students who thought I was Ayn Rand's son.
Oh,
no.
I guess they were like mad capitalist libertarians who were like following me around. And I don't know if they were disappointed that I didn't dress like Ayn Rand. I don't know how I can think it was all very sort of
I'm having a very mixed reaction to that.
muted colors. Yeah.
It's a little horrifying in some ways, but fascinating in others.
Now, also, the age gap there would have been enormous. I think I was kept in a test tube for years.
And born after she was dead, I think maybe, no?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And she would have supported that because motherhood is way too, it corrupts the child, parenting or any kind of care. Yeah.
But did you make a because now you've gone into so many different genres, did you make a decision at the time to be in sort of an ancillary theme as your mother, from where your mother was, but still be different and make your own path?
Around the first book, none of the decisions were that conscious. They really weren't. I just sat down and wrote a book that I wanted to read. That's really all I did. And then after that, I made the mistake of probably reading way too many reviews, but the questions about genre and business, all of that came later and after the fact. So I really, in the beginning, it was much more about, I want these characters, these gay characters, to get what I wanted characters to get and to do what I wanted characters to do when I was a younger man. And I was young when I wrote the first book. And so, I mean, I thought it was the great American novel, right? Like I was writing and not everyone agreed. So, but it found a place as this kind of page-turning thriller that young gay men were particularly enthusiastic about. And so that was somewhat of a direction that I pursued for a while. But I always felt like the thing that excites me the most is writing these stories that I've seen told in other ways, and with other types of heroes and protagonists and heroines, and putting gay people at the middle of them. And I think the reviews that I was the most excited by of Density of Souls, which was my first book, said this is essentially a gothic novel, but instead of a damaged young haunted woman, we've got a damaged young haunted gay man at the center of it, and everything's focused on him. I thought that was cool. And so when I did it with a thriller, that's what it felt like. I was like, this is a Ludlum novel with a gay guy, and this is a Stephen King novel with a gay guy. It wasn't always that restrictive, because I like writing about ensemble points of view. But that's the path that it took. And the thing about starting so young is that I think reading tastes determine a writer's sensibility more than anything else.
Oh, absolutely.
And when you're young, you're still a new reader. Like you haven't been exposed to everything yet. So when I got exposed to Raymond Chandler and Ross MacDonald, that impacted my style. When I got exposed to, the list goes on and on.
It's always amazing to me too, just remembering when your first book came out and having you on the show, although apparently I wasn't on my show and Billy was when we spoke. But, at the time, 2000, and still even today within the science fiction genre or the fantasy genre for both books and entertainment, it's still newsworthy when there's an openly gay character, which is really kind of horrific to me as I think about it. With the new Star Trek series that was out, I think it's called Discovery, had 2 gay characters on it, and it's news still, right? And it really shouldn't be, especially I think just from a fan viewpoint. If you can do anything you want because it's fantasy or science fiction or whatever, you're making the entire world up. you could give us a seat at the table once in a while. You know?
Yeah. I think it also highlights how far the distance is between a seat and the table and being the center of the story. And I think if you want the center of the story, you still have to go to the written word. Really, for a lot of people, I think there have been huge strides in Hollywood around race. Crazy Rich Asians was a big deal. That was a big deal to have a movie at that level that was that good, with that quality craftsmanship behind it and that budget, and not have white people at the center of it. Big deal. We haven't had that for gay people yet. We really haven't had the big budget. And let's say something that's not hardship focused.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Because that can be a romantic comedy or just a flat out comedy.
We had Mamma Mia 1 and Mamma Mia 2. Yeah.
Right. That's true. That was very important to our community.
And Cats.
But, Cats, Cats is getting expunged from the record. I haven't seen Cats, but I've read.
I don't know any gay person who wants to take credit for that.
I actually bought tickets to see Cats in the movie theater, and I bought them for the wrong day. So I bought tickets and then didn't even go see it.
Oh, the last I needed to hear about Cats was Dan Savage tweeting, "I wasn't prepared for the cats to be biting the heads off of animated cockroaches." And I was like, I think that's all I need to know about this movie.
Well, now I'm a little interested.
Yeah, well, maybe that clip is on YouTube. You can go find it.
If I could just see that, it's fine. Sue O'Connell, we have to let you go. I just gained the signal.
I hope it's not going to be another, 20 years again before we speak, but it's good to see you.
I'm an icon. I'll be back, apparently.
He's an icon.
I'll be back
we will
for
venerate
Icon
Christopher Rice forever.
All right, everybody get their flu shot and vote.
Sue, thank you. We'll see you back in a couple weeks.
You got it.
Bye, honey.
Bye.
Christopher, I think what I found so interesting about you when I was doing the research, you're really funny. I was watching some of your podcasts. You made me laugh out loud. Because I've seen you interviewed. And again, I think there's sort of a thing that when you're being interviewed, particularly about your work and your product, you're really more earnest and you're serious and you don't want to make light of it because it's almost trivializing the work. But when you're doing a show and you're in your own element, you can be more of yourself. And I really saw there is so many layers to you. I mean, there is the sarcasm, there is the intellectual wit, and then there's just silliness. And I don't think people think, boy, that Christopher Rice is a laugh riot.
I don't know. I don't know if they do. I think they might think that he's draped in some sort of goth curtains and swinging under his mother's legs. That seems to inform a lot of their Facebook comments. I'll put it that way. But I think the key to that is to get a best friend who is a little bit funnier than you are, and that is a good description of Eric Shaw Quinn, who I do that podcast with. He is so funny and so quick, and keeping up with him has really gotten me to sharpen my skills. But I think some of it is the older I got, the less seriously I took myself. I think in the beginning, I was so nervous and so anxiety ridden promoting those books that it was like I have to hit the talking points and I have to never offend anyone. And now it's like the older you get, you care less about. I'm not perfect. I'm not transcended. I haven't transcended all, self-conscious worry. But I think you get a little bit more relaxed. And I think some of it's because in terms of promoting yourself, you realize there's no surefire strategy to guarantee success. All you can really do is talk about what you've actually done and hope that the conversation reaches the people who are interested. And there was a lot when Eric and I started the Dinner Party Show, which is now the TDPS network, which is where we've done 2 podcasts and we do YouTube things.
And all of the old shows are online. People, you should go see them. It's so funny.
Thank you so much. I mean, it was really about, Eric was he was always attracted to this idea around Vanity Fair magazine, right? The mission statement was, if you read it, it was like you had attended a dinner party and you had a smattering of information. And that's really what we wanted the show to be, but we wanted to do sketch comedy. We wanted to do audio, like a radio play. It was really old fashioned. Great way to rise to meet the digital tide was to do something from 60 years ago. So, but it was so much fun. And because we could do anything through sound, we didn't need some giant budget to shoot some skit. We created, it was theater of the mind, as we called it. But we had a lot of celebrities in and we interviewed them too. And now our podcast Christopher and Eric, is much more just the two of us talking. And we do a feature called True Crime TV Club, where we basically watch the trashy true crime special for you and then break it down so that you
Oh, I
don't
like
have
that.
to. So yeah, Christopher and Eric and that's at thedinnerpartyshow.com. And that's the plug.
No, and plug away. But what I thought was really funny about it too was that I think when you have somebody who's working with you like a best friend, you actually got the feeling that you were eavesdropping on two people actually just having a conversation as they would not on TV, not on the radio, but maybe in a restaurant or at their home.
Right.
And you were I know a lot of people who've tried to do this that try to act naturally and it never comes off. You really were, at least you may have been acting, but you came off as very natural. And it really did give me another idea of you, because I always think writers, when you read enough of their work, you get an idea of what that person is. This is a completely different side of you.
It is. Thank you. And I think, honestly, I'm working on something now that's written that may bring out this side of me more.
That was my question.
Yeah. And I think that, like I brought up the Crazy Rich Asians thing because the idea of a gay male romantic comedy has become more and more exciting to me over the years. And I'm a little early to talk about it, but I'm taking my own run at it. And I think that there's an interesting... It's not as prevalent anymore. I was talking on another podcast about this with somebody, that when you were a writer and you did a thing that worked, that's all they wanted you to do. And if you were going to do anything else, you had to use a pen name or you had to rebrand yourself. Honestly,
like Stephen King did, for instance.
Right. He wanted to see, can I do a book and not have this name on it and see how it sells? His son did the pen name thing in the beginning, Joe Hill,
Right.
Okay. So there's all that stuff. But I think what's happening now is that when writers want to branch out, it's so exhausting to keep 5 different social media presences for new pen names, new identities, all that sort of stuff, that you're getting more of a pass on it than you might used to in the past. Because if you've got that social media channel that's working, everybody wants you to feed into that. Doesn't matter what you do. And so I wrote a bunch of erotic romances that were digitally focused. They were very different from what I had done, but I didn't use a pen name. I didn't. I just sort of, and I think some of this is about, you trust the audience to recognize how something is being branded and positioned. If it's got a hot pink cover, you can rest assured it's probably not about cannibal serial killers. You trust the audience. Now, there's always that risk that someone's going to say, this isn't like the 800 other things you've done, but, you got to take risks at some point.
I was reading a lot of social media posts about you, because I always that was a laugh riot. And so, but I was really, again, I've said this on this show so many times that I think that gay men are hardest on other gay men, because either they think that they could do it better than us, they're funnier, they're cuter, they're better writers, or their expectations for us to check every box in their needs isn't being met. And that is the category I found the criticisms about you in. That, why is he writing about straight people? Why is there a female protagonist? Why is there this? And I'm like, give the poor boy a break. He can't do everything. And sometimes you want to do something different.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'm just curious that at the beginning, being gay was great in terms of having a niche audience following you. But it seems to me that it has to be a double-edged sword.
It probably is a double-edged sword. Anything that's not about you writing about what obsesses you is a double-edged sword, because it's very hard to write about something you're not obsessed with. It becomes really grueling labor, right? And sometimes you got to take a job for money to stay in the game, and that's fine. But if you're really giving a year of your life to something, it really needs to captivate you. And I was in the beginning very attracted to stories in which gay men were vulnerable and under threat, but women came in with guns and fixed it. Because there really was an aspect of my life where women were a balancing force for good. In environments that were almost entirely male. And so I never was comfortable excising them completely. And I wrote a book called The Moonlit Earth, which elicited a lot of the criticism you described. It was about a brother and sister. And it was basically about a sister going to save her gay brother, who had gone missing in relationship to a terrorist incident overseas. So, it felt completely natural to me, and their sibling relationship felt reflective of so many of my friendships with straight women. But I think, to get back to what you were talking about with the needing to check every box, I think it is a representation crisis that causes that. And I think you find it in a lot of different minority communities. There's this anxiety and fear that you're going to be one of the three that everybody else sees. And so you need to do this and this and this and this, and not be this and this and this and this. It happens if you are, a gay public figure with political beliefs that do not fall perfectly in line with a certain set of commonly held beliefs by the gay community. You're a pariah. You are blackballed.
Right.
Sometimes you're a jerk. Sometimes you're not. But I think the solution to that is more expansive representation, right? That's the thing. And I think it is better now than it was when I started. I mean, just the climate is better now. But like, if you released a gay novel around the time mine came out, you needed to be Michael Cunningham or you were in trouble. Right. Like, that was really how you were viewed. If you were not a sophisticated literary, and I like Michael Cunningham, I'm a fan of it.
But a critic's style.
Yeah. If you were not communicating the social reality of urban gay life, which was really under threat at the time from AIDS, your voice was a problem and a liability. That was the tone of a lot of criticism. And I think we've moved past that. I think things have gotten better, but I think we've moved back that because the whole culture has moved past that,
Yeah, well, I think you're right. I think when I started, I've been writing my weekly column now. We just celebrated 25 years. So, I mean, it's been forever. And when I started,
congratulations.
Thank you. I'm not sure exactly of the date, but it was August 1995.
Yeah.
And when I first off, I don't think people realize when I started, there was barely an internet. There were papers I had to fax a column to or snail mail it to. And there certainly was nothing called syndication for gay papers. It was something I had to start from scratch. But at the time, AIDS was very prevalent, in the idea of writing a silly, gossipy column about Hollywood seemed so trite to people. And unless you were going to go for the jugular and really out people or rip them apart, there was very little use for you unless you were really funny and they said, oh, okay, it's a humor column. But that also opened the door for, say, the Perez Hilton or the tabloid media to come in to fill that void, because somebody says, okay, well, you're not doing it, but now somebody else will do that. And then what they'll do is they will turn on that person for somebody else who's going to be the Dan Savage, who can be funny, but also politically active. So I think that now you've got all this spectrum of content that you can now, because back then, there was very little content. Now there's so much that you can say not every piece is for every person. If you don't like this one, go read somebody else.
That's what I've always felt when it comes to criticism of books, right? I think you are so not legally required to read this book. I mean, a publicist never wants to hear you say that, but like, I am such an option. I am not running for president. I have no plans to. I'm not putting myself in a position where I can sign bills into law to change how people live. I am one political person who can vote and speak out. Now, there is the matter of having a platform and how you use your platform, right? And I think there are moments where people with platforms need to be disagreed with, and I think the disagreement is healthy. But you made me think of, I wrote a kind of interesting tide at The Advocate where I had a column there for years, and a lot of people had columns. It was like we would rotate columns and you'd write every 6 months because there were so many columns in this one space. But they said, look, when they hired me, they're like, we have enough people attacking the right wing. Nobody's missing out on the horrible stuff the right wing is trying to do to us in this era. We need voices who are looking more at the community and talking about what's going on in the community and in the minds of gay men. And so a lot of what I wrote was perceived as self-loathing, because it was actually directed at other gay people treating other gay people. And I think you're right. We can be incredibly hard on myself. Eric Charquin says that some of the worst homophobia he's ever experienced has come from other gay men. Not from outside.
I think the performers in particular, I'm friends with a lot of performers. I am a performer, and I will find that if you have a room of gay men for, say, a gay comedian, they are not going to be as vocal with their approval. And I don't know if it's because it's a self-conscious thing, if it's a critical thing, if it's a self-loathing thing, or if it's an envy thing, which is so often the case.
I think the envy thing could be really, there's always an undercurrent in every gay friendship of, well, there's the obvious one, right? Which is there a sexual component, or how have they arrived at the decision that there isn't one? But there's also competition.
Or did they both come to that decision? Because sometimes one doesn't.
Right, absolutely. And then there's competition. Are you in the market? Like some of my best friends and I, not to get too explicit, we don't play the same position. Yes. And we're pretty restrictive in our position, right? So we don't compete for the same men. We're sort of in boxes as far as that goes. But we're
not in boxes.
Right. And it's why you can suddenly have, I think, such a surprising, intimate friendship with a straight guy. Right. Because those issues are not on the table. You're not in competition. Unless you're nursing some ill-advised delusional attraction, it's not, you're not going to sleep with the guy. And I have had the most, like you get crazy, like in the gym back when we used to go to gyms. Like if you really got comfortable, if a straight guy got comfortable with you, all they wanted to do was ask you about gay stuff, because gay sex, I should say, because they were so curious and they just really wanted to know, because they didn't really know anything about it. And it would be these weird conversations, but also these really revelatory and interesting conversations. But yeah, I think that there's also just this sort of PTSD of being part of a community where everyone shares sort of a portion of the abuse that we've suffered, Yeah. We can redirect that on each other in ways that are not exactly healthy.
Well, you're kind of paying it forward because you're doing the behavior that you have received or you're used to.
Yeah.
And I know that as I've gotten older, it's one of the things I've thought about is, why do I criticize this thing in somebody? Maybe it's because it bothers me, but just because it bothers me doesn't mean it bothers somebody else. So calm down and just keep your opinion to yourself.
Right.
Because if you're saying, oh, why don't you do that? The answer may be, I don't want to. And that's okay, because you also want people to accept that you want to do things that they don't want. But you talked about the competition in the gay community and the looks issue. And one of my favorite things you did is well, you know where I'm going. I'm going to show a text post that you had written. So so, you never get tired of this one, I'm sure. No. If I don't win the Bram Stoker Award tonight, expect mad shirtless selfie action in a desperate clawing bid for validation. And like clockwork, there it is. Now, first off, I think you look great.
Thanks.
But I saw first, and I don't know why it should be. I should leave it up a little longer for those of you who didn't see it.
I'd like to see what I used to look like.
And this is 6 years ago.
Yeah, that was a while ago. Those weeks are a while ago. I can tell you that. But there've been a lot of pita chips since then.
Yeah, well, honey, we've all eaten them. But it was funny because I saw both sides in the comments to this picture. I saw the people who were like, oh my God, he's so hot. He's so cute. Who is he? I don't know who he is. Now I'm a fan. And then, oh my God, who does he think he is? He's so desperate. He's not that hot. I wouldn't fuck him. I'm like, okay, well, nobody was offering. Hello. And so I think it's so brave. You've done shirtless pictures before, but I think it's so, first off, very cheeky and brave of you to just sort of put yourself out there and say, hi, here I am. And knowing that you're going to get bashed by a good segment of the community. What was the experience for you on the inside, having put it out there? Or have you learned to just not pay attention?
I'm learning not to pay attention. I mean, that's the tricky part of that. It's like, can you really do it and just put yourself out there and enjoy it and not read all the comments? I read way too many of the comments. I read all those comments you did.
Yeah,
I think Butterface was the one I remember. Huge hot Butterface, like that.
Oh, I missed that one. All right. Yeah. I saw a lot of people kept comparing you. You may have missed this to Matt Damon.
I'm fine with that. I've been trying my whole life. Everybody would compare me to Kevin Bacon, and I was like, I don't want to sound ungrateful.
Oh, I read those too.
Matt Damon in there because I I really enjoy looking at Matt Damon. But anyway.
And they were saying that you were like a hotter Kevin Bacon.
Oh, okay. All right.
So,
I'll take it. Listen.
They weren't saying the hotter Matt Damon, though. I have to clarify.
No, there is no such thing as hotter. Matt Damon is as hot as it gets.
Exactly.
Matt Damon and Tom Holland is probably a try.
Yeah.
But I think that I did that to enjoy it. And I told myself before I posted it, the years when you're going to be able to do this are going away. Like I was probably in my mid to late, I think it was in my late 30s when I did that. I'm now in my 40s. So I thought, just live it up. But I wished I had just been able to sort of put it out there and not read as many of the comments as I did, you know. But that said, it can be a mind-altering experience to get as much attention as I did. And, you know, I really did do it literally the night I didn't win the award. I was sitting at a table in the hotel with my friend Cami Garcia, who's also a writer. She wrote Beautiful Creatures. And I said, I'm going to do it. And she's like, wait, what are you doing? And then I did it. And during the conversation with her, because what happens is you post stuff on social media all the time, but then like 1 or 2 or 3 blogs need to pick something up for it to really go.
Immediately,
and within a few minutes, it was like Queerty. I was like, oh God, Queerty. So I don't regret it. I mean, in another complete fantasy life, I was a porn star. I have this elaborate fantasy life where I went off and did that. I don't think I could ever do it. I'm way too self-conscious to do it. But it was also about trying not to care. Like I'm not sure I was 100% successful, but it was like, I'm going to see if I can just do this and not care about the result.
That's hard.
40% success rate. Yeah.
Now you had the photo ready. So say you had won the award, would we have never seen this photo? Or
I don't think so. I would have found an excuse to post the photo. I posted the photo. I was really working hard at the gym. I had a trainer. I was going really consistent.
Well, clearly.
And I hit some lighting. I got out of the shower and I was like, this is a photo. And like, I'm not actually an app person. I've never been a sort of Grindr or Tinder person. And so I don't usually have a lot of cause to take sort of, you know, risque photos of myself. But I thought, you know, the lighting is so good in here. I got to snap this one. And I thought, I can't just put it on social media. That's just way too desperate. I have to
need a reason.
So it was a couple months went by, I think, between when I took it and when I actually posted it.
Oh, that was my next question. So you had it in reserve and you're like, one of these days. Well, I'm glad you did. And I also think that, you know, reading the things about it, again, comments are always more revelatory of the person who's making them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it sort of does. And if you weren't getting any criticism, you're doing something wrong. Right. So, you know, it's easy to sort of keep those things in your head, but still get hurt by something because we're human.
Right. And absolutely.
I think to myself that these people, it's like me saying, oh, what I'm criticizing in my friend is my issue. And it does sort of help you get the temperature of your audience. So I actually, first off, I think you probably got a lot more fans than you lost. I don't think you lost any fans. And it sort of made you the topic for a bit. Well, now 6 years later, we're still talking about it.
I think part of it too was it was unexpected for a writer. Like we were used to James Franco and actors doing this, and Geraldo Rivera did it. But this idea that this, like you said, that this introverted writer would get out there and do this. And I'll say this, you know, here's what got me out of any sort of negative focus about it. I have been the commented on, and I have been the commenter. And I know how it feels to be scrolling late one night when I'm not feeling my best and to be deluged with images of people being perfect, seeming perfectly happy, people in better shape than me. And I have had the urge to lash out and do that. And so it's like we're all human beings and we are all being subjected to this constant stream of stimulation now. I've actually taken a step back from social media recently. I've used it more strategically and less because I was on there doom scrolling, they call it, just doom scrolling. And so I understand the people, and I will say this, I didn't get any hate really on my own channels, on my own platforms. I went and read comments on like blogs and on out.com and all those on their social. That's when I saw what people were really, you know, letting loose.
I find that most people will not directly comment you. You know, and it doesn't happen on my site. It doesn't happen on my social either. And I try not to Google my name. You know, news stories are one thing, but comments and websites I don't care about, you try not to. I mean, it is hard because you're putting yourself out there. And so when you write, and again, as a writer, but also a performer, your material is you.
Yeah.
And so I'm very protective of what I write. And if people don't like it, I do interpret it as, oh, they don't like me. Now, if they say, oh, Billy Masters is ugly, that doesn't hurt me nearly as much.
No. And it's if the knife lands in a place where you're already feeling vulnerable. I think that's and I think there's a complex psychological stew that leads us to Google ourselves. And some of it is we're looking for something specific. We're looking for validation. We're looking for the praise that'll maybe make us feel better. But also there can be moments where the criticism feels strangely validating because it makes us feel like a victim. And I think I'm worried about the extent to which social media creates that perpetual cycle of putting ourselves out there, feeling attacked, and turning the sense of attack into a sense of performative victimhood. Whereas I think the healthier thing for a lot of us to do is put our work out there and step back from it and not police the conversation in any way and not involve ourselves in the conversation. But it's hard to do because it is. I have moments like with the new book out last week, I'm looking at the review count on Amazon. I'm seeing how they rack up. Like some of those numbers matter, but the numbers matter more than the content. Like, you know, like there's data out there that says most people on these retail sites look at the number of reviews and the average star rating, but they don't actually
not reading them.
They aren't reading them. No. But there are communities of people who are talking to each other. And I don't want to diminish internet reviewers because they're very valuable, and they're particularly valuable for genre fiction because we have not always had a lot of respected people who respect our genres working at major media publications. So the book programmers and all of those people who really support and amplify the books they love, they're really valuable, and these are platforms for them. But in terms of, are you going to be ruined by one negative Amazon review? It's not an accurate perspective.
Yeah, I also think that when people review something, particularly if they're people that you don't know anything about, I will say that if there is somebody whose name I recognize that I've seen comments from and I agree with or have an idea, that because now you know something about the person. But anonymous comments, typically I try not to give them too much value.
You know what I did once just before I went on Data Lounge. Do you know what Data Lounge is? Remember Data Lounge?
Familiar with Data Lounge.
I read comments about me on Data Lounge, and I have never read so many flat out lies about my body from people.
Oh, I read some of those last night. Yes.
I was like, some are true. Some are true. The good ones are all true, but there were some like, I was like, A, who are you? B, it was, you know, and I think it's like role play for people in a
I think it is. And they use funny names.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, and sometimes if something really hits me, I will click on the name to see what other comments they have written. And then I realize, oh, well, they attack Christopher Rice too. I'm in good company. Fine. Tell me I'm a hack like that, Christopher Rice.
Yeah, right. Bring it. Bring it.
But, I think that you have been in a really tricky position because your mother is Anne Rice. I will say, and this is full disclosure, that when I announced that you were going to do the show, and you and I have been talking for about a month, and we timed it so that the book was coming out, a couple people did say to me, oh, are you going to have his mother on as well? Because I usually will bring in surprise guests and purposefully never even reached out to your mother because I would think that, number one, that's something that's been done a million times. And also, you are your own person. But to a lot of people, that is the first thing that comes to mind. And I'm wondering, how is that for you now? Not when you started, but now.
It's fine. And I think part of why it's fine is because I made a conscious decision later in my career to work with her, to collaborate with her.
I noticed that.
Knowing full well what that would involve. When she came for years, she had been debating the idea of whether or not to write a sequel to one of her more popular novels, called The Mummy or Ramses the Damned. That's the title. It was published right before The Vampire Lestat, and it was popular and it had a big audience and a lot of fans, but then The Vampire Lestat took off and that's all anybody wanted. So it got kind of orphaned and it ended with a cliffhanger, all this sort of stuff. And she said, she came to me in a moment when I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do next and said, do you want to write the sequel with me?
Wow.
And I thought, I knew enough at that point. This was not very long, just a few years ago, about what people might say And I talked to Eric Shaw Quinn about it, and he said, you need to be prepared right now in this moment that no matter how good it is, people are going to loudly say it's not as good as the original. And as long as you can accept that, you can probably take anything that comes. And I did. And the bigger challenge around that was writing in somebody else's world. I mean, it was a true picked up from the last moment of the previous book sequel that just continued the story forward from where I'd left it. So that was really the bigger challenge. And I think that gave me a thicker skin about it. That was not something I could have done at the beginning of my career. And I think, as you sort of mentioned at the beginning of the show, our styles were so different. I just didn't feel for a second anybody was going to ever confuse us. You know, I was writing these very contemporary, the literary style or the tone of them was very cinematic, very brusque, almost like a detective novel. Some of them were detective novels. It wasn't the lush Gothic atmosphere that people associated with Anne Rice and still associate with Anne Rice. So stepping into that took work. But all of that for me was more challenging. The technical aspects of the job were more challenging than what anybody was going to say about it. They really were.
And how is that criticism or comparison now? Is it still out there in the zeitgeist as much as it was when you started? Or do you think at this point you have enough of a track record that people can delineate?
I think that the criticism of, oh, he's only where he is because he's her son, that's much less out there.
Oh, thank God.
Once you get to 10 or 11 books, however many, there are plenty of people who, I mean, let's face it, it was a day and age when I first came out where, like, if you were the gay son or daughter of someone famous, they gave you a beach house. They were like, here you are, you're on the cover of The Advocate, you're speaking at this award ceremony, you know, like, because it was, again, getting back to that representation thing, there wasn't a lot of representation.
Yeah, who was there? It was you and Chaz Bono, I think.
It was me, it was Chaz Bono, it was me and Chaz Bono.
I mean, I think those are the two.
Those are the two I can think of off my head. And we actually, Chaz and I, we had a conversation about it. Like, we should have lunch one time and talk, you know, because we have some things in common. So
yeah.
But that, putting that aside, what that means is there was a lot of attention that was not based in the book, and that was fine. And I'll be the first to admit that. But today it's much less, it's more criticism about what I've actually written. And that's the preferable alternative.
Yeah, I found when I was reading reviews for the current book, we'll just put it up again. Hello.
Hey,
Blood Victory. Hello. And by the way, beautiful colors. I love the cover.
Amazon, Thomas and Mercer, their covers are just fantastic.
Yeah,
I'm happier with these covers than I've been with any of them. Yeah.
And I haven't seen it in person. I'm assuming it's as vibrant as it looks.
Yes, it is. You know, I've got one right here. Hold on,
let me see. Oh, wow. Yeah, it does jump. And with really, that's really pretty.
Right.
I love how they did the lighting. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Hardcover.
There you go. But I would, I read some of the reviews for the book, and what I did not see, and I scanned like 5 reviews last night, not once did I see your mother's name. But what I did see was comparison to your other work. Yeah. And so I like that, because it seems to me that you've created now this universe where you're compared to yourself rather than, as a matter of fact, I don't think I read a comparison to any other writer.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, I mean, that's what you hope for, that people are that familiar with what you've done that they can compare you to your other work.
It also, I read an interview with you when you were starting out that you were talking about that you made a conscious choice of who your gay characters would be, and that it seemed like it was sort of processing your interpretation of what you had seen either on screen or read in books, that maybe gay characters were portrayed a certain way, so you were going to go the exact opposite approach. Are you a contrarian by nature and sort of want to forge your own path, or is it really just the story that dictates who those characters are going to be?
I think over time it's become the story, but I am a contrarian by nature, but I'm also an assimilationist when it comes to a lot of LGBT issues. Like I'm an assimilationist who supports the right of people not to assimilate. You know what I mean? But my tastes, my cultural tastes have always been very mainstream. And so I was always very resistant. Like I said earlier with the Michael Cunningham thing, I was resistant to the idea that a gay writer could only write about one thing, that you couldn't write bodice rippers, that you couldn't write, you were doing a disservice to the community if you were just about the page turner or the detective novel or all these sort of things. So that felt in the beginning like it made me a contrarian. But this was a time in the gay press where supporting gay marriage was an unpopular idea. Gay marriage was seen as not radical enough. I had friends who worked at magazines who were blacklisted because they were advocates of gay marriage. And it was like, no, that's too heteronormative. That's too. So I never really stood with that crew. But I think that I wrote gay characters doing the things I had always wanted them to do in movies and television shows that didn't exist. That's really what I did. It didn't go much deeper than that, but that was about creating something there that I didn't see a huge, now ironically, and this is a controversial subject, this exists now in an area of publishing and books that a lot of gay men are very hostile about, which is the genre of gay romance, because so many of the books are written by women for an audience of women, but they are getting more and more attention from gay men, and they're becoming to include more and more gay male authors. And I think I was really resistant to the idea at the beginning. And then I started reading it and I went, oh, they're doing what I always wanted, which is they're doing the Star Trek with two men. They're doing the cop show with two men. It's not about AIDS. It's not about bullying and homophobia exclusively. Those may be aspects of it.
It's telling this story, but recasting it with gay men.
Right. And I thought it was the sex thing. I was like, how are they going to get the sex right? Well, a lot of them get it very right. Let me tell you, there's been a lot of internet research done. The point I think I'm trying to make is that the animosity towards that genre as it surfaces in gay men, I think is really more of a reflexive hostility towards the commercial understanding of what a romance novel is today. And it's hiding underneath this idea that women shouldn't be allowed to do this, all sort of stuff. I encourage people to actually check it out. If you're a fan of popular fiction, check it out, because there's a lot of interesting things going on, and there are a lot of neat stories.
Yeah, and I think that, conversely, we can go back decades and say that all those women who are writing straight romance novels didn't live those as well. I don't ever picture Dame Barbara Cartland doggy style.
And that's the point, right? That's exactly the point, that the romantic storyline is often an elevated aspirational fantasy about what we believe is actually required of two human beings to make a romantic commitment work. It does not claim to be grounded in gritty realism. It has never made this claim. And so the standard for that story when it's about two men shouldn't be any different than when it's about two women. And I think what you're looking for is something that taps into that's what happened, is that too many of these stories tapped into the emotional, ambitions, hopes, fantasies of me as a gay man for me to dismiss the genre as a whole. I remember having the experience of reading one of them and realizing, oh, wait, these guys aren't going to die. I suddenly realized it's a romance novel. It promises me a happy ending. One of them isn't going to kill the other. One of them isn't going to die of AIDS or cancer or a heart attack. It's not going to be. And listen, I loved Brokeback Mountain and I loved Moonlight. And spoiler alert, Moonlight has a happier ending than Brokeback Mountain. And there's a place for all of it. But that's the point. There's a place for all of it.
Well, I think you're right. And I think it goes back to what we said, is that when there was so little, I remember I used to review a lot of films for Outfest, and we're going back 20 years that I would go to the office and get stacks of videotapes or DVDs to watch them. And I saw one horrible film after another. They were repulsive. And I had so many people say to me, I couldn't bash them because we have to support them because it's all we have. And I'm like, when did gay become good? Good is good. And if it's not good, maybe by bashing it, it will inspire somebody to do something a little better. So I think things have changed with the more product out there, is now people realize, oh, just being gay is not good enough.
No, that's very true. That's very true. And I think a lot of those movies now, they end up on the internet and they might get lost or they get discovered, which is
That's
good.
true.
But I think you're right. But I think there's another element to that, which is something that I observed in Hollywood, which is that a lot of gay talents with a lot of talent and ability would not even associate with gay material. And it's not just a matter of closeted actors, but it was like, there was a time like in television, there was a shift in television. Ryan Murphy's part of it. Shonda Rhimes is part of it. But Greg Berlanti is also a part of it, where they started fusing their talents with gay storylines. And that was a huge deal. I remember when Eric Jacquin called me, he said, you got to watch Brothers and Sisters for this reason alone. And this was one of Greg Berlanti's first really big shows. Right. And he said, they're treating the gay storyline with as much time and as much consideration as all the other storylines. They are truly part of the narrative. And sure enough, he was right. And I got heavily into the show for that reason. But before that, if you were a really talented filmmaker, a really talented writer, director, creator, you were probably, and you were gay, but you really wanted to swing for the fences, you probably were not going to sell a gay story. You probably weren't going to try to sell a gay storyline. Right. That's not to say all the people that did were not talented, but there was a talent drain as a result of the closet that was happening. And I think it had an effect, and I think it's loosened up. And I think we have a lot of those vanguards to thank.
Yeah, and I will also say from personal experience, when I started writing the column, somebody said to me, one of the syndicators that wanted to work with me said, you know, if you didn't have as much gay content, we could get you in papers around the country. Oh, yeah. And I said, I get that. And, you know, there is always that side that, oh, you could make more money, you could have more notoriety.
Absolutely.
But I also find that as a writer, writing is so transparent for the most part that if you're not being authentic to who you are, you wouldn't have lasted 25 years. Yeah. So I think there is a choice that you have to make. It may be to be the big fish in the little pond, but it also may be the best way to express yourself as an artist.
Absolutely. And I think there's also an aspect of it too, getting back to the gay movie thing of like, when somebody does try to make a gay movie, when they try to look at they try to tap into universal gay themes, there's really only one thing that unites all 10% of us. And it's, the men, at least the gay men and the trans men who identify as gay, it's sex. Right. So they're going to make these body sexy, outrageous, you know, like, because if they haven't committed to telling a real story about a specific set of characters, that's what you're going to get. And what it produced was a repetition. And there may be times when I've been guilty of it too, the same sort of tropey storylines over and over again, the go-go boy with a heart of gold, the closet case, if I had to watch one more effing coming of age, you know, like just can't, like, but there's a hunger now in me, at least, for where are the grown-ups? Where are the grown-ups not just trying to be married, but they're already married. They're trying to run a business. They're trying to do this. Where are these stories? And I think they're coming, and I think they're spreading.
Well, I'll say that I have friends I went to high school with who now have children who are in high school. And the stories I hear from, it's extraordinary to me that what I hear from people specifically is far more than what I read in the media about how open and normal they're able to be in high school and earlier. I have a friend who teaches first grade who said to me, and this was so fascinating, and it talks to what you said about how you see the world and what normal is to you, that after summer vacation, somebody who was in kindergarten, a boy, started coming to school in first grade in dresses, and he had changed his name. Now is she. And I said, how did the kids relate to him? And the kid said, oh, now he's a girl. Okay. That was as simple as that. And she said the problem was when the parents got involved. So I think that all this stuff targeted towards kids and the Love Simons and the young adult stuff is, I think those people are really hungry for something that speaks to their experience, which is vastly different than yours or mine.
Yeah, oh, it is. I'll tell you, just when my first book came out, having people come up and mention the gay-straight alliance in their high school, I was only a few years out of high school at that point. I couldn't wrap my head around it. There was not going to be anything of the kind like that at my high school. They may have one now. I have no idea. I'm 40 now, but yeah, I think that's absolutely a change. But I think also, like, it's not necessarily, I want there to be stuff for young people, but I think those are the older ones among us, we are entitled to our stories too. And I think we are more likely to be served by these romance stories than we realize, because I think they are about grown-ups finding love outside of strict structures of oppression. And so I've been attracted to that, and I've been fed and nourished by that recently. But I think, it's so interesting because I heard the story of my friend who, she made some statement about sexuality in front of her her kid, or like, or is that person gay or straight? And I think this was an 8-year-old said, "Mom, sexuality is fluid."
Wow.
Like, and this is a very liberal woman, so she wasn't upset, but she was a little set back by how much further along on these issues her daughter was.
Well, I and I think you're right. I think that in a way, our generation, say the 30, 40, 50-year-olds, are being sort of eclipsed by that movement for the young people. And also, we did live through a pandemic. We lived through an AIDS crisis.
Yeah.
And so the idea of romance always seems to have that specter hovering over it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's nice, and it is enormously refreshing when you see something that's just fun or just silly or just romantic and doesn't sit. You're not waiting up. One of them's going to get a test.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Did you see The Truth About Harry? I think it was called.
Yeah.
I just loved it because it was exactly what it was. It was a gay romantic comedy about two guys. You know, it was totally, and it was clever and it was funny and and you're right. It wasn't that thing. And it had what they call in romance a black moment where you think all is lost. Boy loses boy. Right. I just thought it was great. And I think there's room for a lot more of that. I don't think it needs to be the only thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I just read that Hallmark is doing gay for their Christmas movies.
Absolutely.
And again, coming from last year when they couldn't even show a gay wedding in a commercial, now they're doing a whole gay movie. Again, I think those setbacks are things that help because it starts the conversation going, and look what's come out of it in less than a year. Things happen so quickly. It's shocking.
It is. It's very shocking.
And so speaking of quickly, we're really coming to the end of our time. My God, I know. I'm looking at comments. Okay, no, I've asked all of these questions. Come up with better questions, people.
Oh, people are commenting. Can I see?
Oh, yeah. Well, you'll be able to see them afterwards. Yeah, you can't see them on here.
You don't want me to see. You don't.
There's no bad comments. I swear. Delete those comments, kids. Let me ask you about your mother. What is your mother doing, Jerry? How is she doing during the pandemic?
Well, you know, this is the thing, and it's similar to my life too. Our lives are really unchanged by the pandemic. This is how we work all the time. We work from home, unless we're doing TV stuff that takes us out of the house. But the whole entertainment industry is on pause right now. So we've been working at home essentially, and she loves her subscription channels on her Amazon Fire. She loves her British mysteries, and every day she's texting me about another one that she's watching. And I'm doing the same. I barely left the house.
So where are you?
I'm in West Hollywood.
You're
in Coachella Valley.
Right. Okay. So I was when I started doing this show, and it was in response to the pandemic, to give me something to do, to give people something to watch, and that wasn't all news oriented, because you do have to laugh. And but I realized that my life really hasn't changed very much, and I felt almost guilty about that, because I had friends who were so depressed and so sort of get cabin fever, and I just kept saying, I'm kind of fine. I mean, the one thing I have found as a writer, and you've probably found this as well, is that we can do the things we need to do, but in terms of new projects or being motivated to actually sit down and get something new done, that's been hard for me.
I've had my moments, and I think the solution has been bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
Like, the problem is that with an uninterrupted span of time like this, where we're so isolated and we're so at home, if we tackle a long-term project and we look at it, we try to look at the whole marathon in one swoop, we're like, oh my God, I need something to break up the time. And so taking those projects and breaking them down into little achievable goals so I can finish another day just like yesterday with a sense of satisfaction and accomplishment at the end. That has been the most helpful to me, but it's hard for writers to stay in that place, because we are long form thinkers, and our head can go there really quickly.
And we can be very overwhelmed by, as you said, the whole mass of a project. Right. And the good thing again about having a column and a deadline is I know whether I'm in the mood to write a column or not, every Sunday it has to go out. Nobody is interested that you had writer's block or nothing funny came to you, or that you don't think it's good enough. Send, it's out. And
Yeah.
That's the only structure, that in this show. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the way to introduce that, any writer can introduce that into their process by saying, ask a friend who you know is busy but whose opinion you trust to read it at some point. Let them know it's forthcoming, and then you have to work with their schedule, and you have to build some sort of deadline into your process.
Because they're waiting for it.
Yeah, because they're waiting for it. And they're not interested in waiting around forever. You are not the only thing they care about.
Do you have any tricks? Because I know that people will have, like, they'll start a sentence and then leave their computer knowing that when they come back, they'll be in that same space. How do you recapture that moment?
I really recapture it by reading over what I wrote the day before or in the previous sitting. That's really how I get back into it. It's like a printer that scans the page as it prints. Like I don't plow straight ahead and no looking back. I look back a little bit and move forward. I look back a little bit and move forward. And I'm really writing to give myself something I want to read. Hopefully, like if I'm not writing something I want to read, I got a problem. So
have you written something that you don't like? Now you look back, say 10 years ago, that you say, ugh.
It's not whole works, but it was my approach to issues. And some of my opinions that are, I think, were less informed creeping in. I remember giving a book to a friend of mine who was a sex worker and saying, look, there's some opinions about sex work in here that are not the opinions that I hold today. And one character expresses them harshly of another. Things like that. I think really the hardest part for me about my earlier books are just the prose and the dialogue. It's just the technical stuff that I think you get better at as you go along, as you read more, as you write more. And I think I go back and I'm like, oh, I wish this sentence flowed a little bit better. But they're all sort of time capsules of where I was at that point in my life. And so it's like the old Irish saying, you can't go back and change anything, that you'll change it all.
Are you a rewriter?
I am a reviser. I like to think of myself, I'm a second draft writer. That's really where I get it. The first draft is like they're all coming together and they're talking to each other and they're getting to know each other. But the second draft, I see in the first draft what the story is, and then I whip it into shape. And the second draft usually comes out a lot quicker.
Do you skip sections and say, I'll fill this in later, I want to go on to this plot point? Very rarely.
Very rarely. I mean, what happens is I'll usually look back and go, something's missing from there. I'm going to drop this in. It's a flashback. It's something. But it's very rare that I consciously skip past something. I'm too OCD. It would drive me nuts.
Is there a type of book that you would like to write that you haven't?
Well, it sort of teases something. I have never written a full-on gay romance. And I may soon.
Would you write a memoir?
Ooh. When I first got that question, it was my second book. And I was like, what do you think I have to say? I'm like 23. Yes, I would. But it would need to be focused on something. It would need to be about something other than I was born, I grew up. I would need like a thesis statement for it. I'm not the biggest, most of the nonfiction that I read, I'm not a big memoir fan. I think people have a tendency to stretch the truth in their memoirs. And I think there've been a lot of really famous memoirs that have been proved to be kind of fiction masquerading as memoir. So I don't read a lot of them. I read a lot of research-based nonfiction that's usually about horrible, disturbing things and crimes. And luckily, nothing so horrible has happened to me, knock on wood, that I feel like it could make a whole book.
I've been reading a lot. For some reason, I've been on this Gore Vidal kick lately. Oh, yeah. And I've been going back because I love the idea of sort of historicalized fiction or fictionalized history. Right. Because I think that there is a freedom there. And as I've read your books in the past, you create a world, and I'd be curious what you would do with a non-fictional, tackling a non-fictional topic like that for the long form.
Yeah, that could be really fun. Alternative history too, where you take a little, like, what if Pearl Harbor was never bombed, things like that, where you explore, particularly in something that's of urgent relevance to the gay community. Like, what if this event never happened? What would the world look like? What if there was never AIDS? What would that look like? What would stuff like that fascinates me. I think sometimes I veer towards a question that's a little too big. Eric Jacquin and I had this conversation, and he was talking about what if McCain had beat Obama, right? What would the world look like? And I was like, yeah, or you could do one of what if the Russians nuked America? And he's like, okay, that's a little severe. The answers there are a little clear. There would be no America. And a more fine-tuned gradation of that.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. Let me ask you, you at one point were working with your mom on a television version of the Vampire Chronicles. Is that correct?
That's correct. They AMC Studios has option, and then they haven't optioned. It was a purchase of the rights to the Vampire Chronicles and the rights to the Mayfair Witches, and this was a first for us that we were able to join these rights for various reasons that are really boring in business and legal related. They were brought together and as a complete package, as a complete universe, and AMC was really enthusiastic and really wanted them. And they, it's a wonderful deal. And then the pandemic hit.
Right. Oh, okay.
So we'll see. I mean, like, it's just everything's on pause. Everything's on pause. Yeah.
Cool. And what about another collaboration with your mother?
I wouldn't rule it out.
All right.
I wouldn't rule it out. We'll see.
Right. And what's your next book? I'm sure you're working on something.
Oh, I'm working. You know, I'm actually writing 2 books, and they're both top secret. But I think one of them, you know, might be a little romantic. I'll just put it that way.
So let me ask about that. Now you've opened a whole new Pandora's box. I know so many people who are writer friends of mine who can work on 2 projects at the same time. How is that in terms of creating, especially if they're dissimilar worlds? Is that
but that's the key. They need to be dissimilar worlds. They need to be tonally different. So in the morning it was a scary book, and in the afternoon it was a funny romantic book. That's how I started to make it work. And if they had been the same, I don't know if I could have done it. This is really new. I used to be the person who couldn't work on 2 things at a time. I could maybe work on a script simultaneously with a book, but they're so different. But this was, I had a morning book and an afternoon book, and I'm bringing them both. I just brought one into completion, and the other one I'm bringing in completion. So this experiment worked, but I've yet to do it with two dark thrillers or 2 funny. Yeah, this is new. So more on this story as it develops. All
right. Well, now we have more to talk about in the future. Christopher, you are a delight. Can I just say, this has flown by. I'm going to again mention the book Blood Victory. Get it at Amazon. What? Go ahead. Go ahead. Let's see. There you go. There. All right. Yeah. And we'll definitely talk again. But thank you so much for doing the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This was lovely.
Okay, take care, Chris. Thank you for watching Billy Masters Live. We will be here Thursday with funny gay males and more stories from, you know, our community and sometimes outside of our community. Next week, big shows. I might take Labor Day off. I don't know. Anyway, take care, stay safe, and just remember, if we're here, we're live. Bye, guys.